Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Hampp. I'm the sponsorship director and a founding court member here at Do the Work. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm so excited to be hosting all of you today. Welcome to the third edition of Open Office Hours. This is a weekly series where the chairs and members of the Do the Work court share the stage with fellow LGBTQ plus creatives and allies for an open discussion on all the things that can help make our work more inclusive, both from a storytelling and a workplace perspective. This short intro period will be the last part of the show where I'm the only person talking. I'm excited to be sharing the floor with all of you who've tuned in to help fuel an honest and open conversation. If this is your first time attending one of our events, welcome. Do the Work, if you're not familiar, is a grassroots organization, creative community, and platform founded earlier this year. We look to empower the ad industry and marketers alike to inspire, reward, and celebrate queer creativity within marketing, advertising, and culture. We also know firsthand how active inclusion for queer talent can unleash untapped creative potential and advance your business. We truly believe that when we're able to be our whole selves in life and in the workplace, everyone wins. And today we want to talk about brands and queer pop culture. This is my personal favorite topic, having worked in music and culture for well over the past decade, and have numerous thoughts which we're going to get into over the next hour. So this is an interactive opportunity to learn from other people in the community and also share your perspectives. Here's what you can expect. Once I share a bit more on today's topic, we'll switch to the grid view. When you want to speak up, press the button to raise your hand. Our moderator Wes, will turn your mic up so you can join in. After you've completed your point, we'll move on to the next person with their hand raised, chosen at random. Please quickly just say your name and pronouns if you'd like before your first time speaking. As you're inspired to ask other specific questions, we're going to have an open Q&A for the last 10 minutes. I'll answer questions directed towards me, and other people can join in as well. There's so much ground to cover here, so I'm going to try to keep each discussion topic to 5 to 7 minutes, give or take. And apologies in advance if anyone doesn't get to chime in on a specific topic. This is the third of many discussion forums staged by Do the Work, and we'll have other weeks of programming over the next couple months to let you dive into other topics. When you do speak up, we just ask that you please be respectful and, of course, be honest. You know, creativity is a positive energy, so we just have a couple ground rules there. Your commentary can be honest and challenging, but also be kind. Keep it focused on how we can change the work, talent, and culture of advertising. I know that's a broad topic, so you'll have no troubles there. Can you swear within reason? We're all adults here. Expletives said for emphasis are okay, but directed swearing is not. Also, please, no name calling or personal negativity. But when it feels right, show love intentionally. Compliments are free and they celebrate creative thinking. As you'll see when we go to grid view, a lot of my fellow court members for Do the Work are here today. So if you see a lot of people sitting around who aren't saying quite as much as me, it's only because we want to hear from all of you joining our discussions for the first time. All right, so that is it for the housekeeping portion, guys. Let's kick off the discussion. So when we talk about brands in queer pop culture, we all know the impact queer culture has on the mainstream. Whether it's RuPaul's Drag Race, Queer Eye, and Pose, to Ellen, Elton, and the hundreds of out and proud LGBTQ plus icons, to groundbreaking films like Moonlight, Paris is Burning, and many, many more, we are lucky to be living in the golden age of inclusive queer storytelling and culture. But we also know that the important role that brands play in reflecting this cultural impact, even if some are doing it better than others. So the goal of today's discussion is to shed some light on a few of those questions. And I want to kick things off with the first of my favorite topics when it comes to how brands play in queer pop culture, and that's drag queens. Drag queens, of course, have been having a moment for over the past decade thanks to the explosive popularity of RuPaul's Drag Race and the many spin-off shows that have popped up in its wake, from Drag Race All-Stars, Drag Race UK, and Drag Race Canada, to shows featuring alums like TLC's Dragnificent, and my personal favorite, HBO's We're Here. But as great as Drag Race is, it has created a few issues in its translation to the mainstream. For starters, many members of the media and blue blue chip brands alike have bought into this idea that drag queens are only worth watching or hiring or only become popular if they've competed on Drag Race. You know, when New York Magazine published its top drag queens in America issue last year with over 100 queens featured, while that was a great moment for, you know, LGBTQ culture for a mainstream magazine like that, that list was limited only to queens from the Drag Race universe. So, you know, that leaves out Lady Bunny, Pepper LaBeija, Peaches Christ, Miss Coco Peru, Conchita Wurst, and so many other iconic queens across the world who don't get to be part of this conversation when it should be, you know, celebrating some of that inclusion. And brands can play into this as well. However, I want to talk about, maybe to kick things off, I think a good way to, one window into this is an example of how brands, I think, are at least doing their part to advance how we use drag queens in some of our creative. I don't know if some of you have seen one of my favorite Pride campaigns that's out there right now from Goose Island. So Goose Island, if you're not familiar, is a well-known craft beer out of Chicago, and they partnered with a Drag Race alum and a current All Stars 5 contestant named Shea Coulee. She has her own limited edition signature beer with them called Shea Cool ALA. God, I love that pun. I love this one because not only is this an empowering way for an otherwise kind of straight identified brand to share its platform with a queer pop culture icon. I particularly love the charity aspect of what they're doing here too, rather than partnering with GLAAD or the Trevor Project, which seem to be the two main go-to charity partners for many brands, and deservedly so, not to take anything away from all the great work many brands are doing with those organizations. What Goose Island is doing is they partnered with an organization called Trans Tech, which provides education and job placement opportunities for trans women and men. So I thought that was a really nice way of both Goose Island and Shea to use their platform for good, and certainly things that are advancing trans issues, which are so inextricable from drag culture as well. So I want to hear from you guys. What are some examples that you think brands either are doing right or could do better when we talk about drag culture and how it should be represented?
So I don't see any hands up yet, but anyone go ahead, raise your hand, get some questions.
While we're waiting for folks, I'll give you another example, because this is one that I think is a great, this is one of the few examples where I've seen a major brand embrace the long tail, let's call it, of drag culture. So if you guys are familiar with Bubbly, which is PepsiCo's sparkling water brand, tomorrow actually they're doing their first virtual Pride Parade, because Bubbly is known for its brightly colored cans and flavors. And so as part of their rainbow imagery, which includes a social enterprise element to benefit 2 different LGBTQ plus organizations, they've hired 10 different drag influencers, 0 of which are from the Drag Race universe. So again, it's weird that we should have to celebrate brands for hiring drag queens that aren't just known for RuPaul's Drag Race, but some of the drag performances that they've include Tina Burner, Pixie Aventura, Rosé, Laguna Blue, Keisha Carr, Zaria, Mary Cherry, and most notably of all, Max Pleasure, who is a drag king. I mean, don't even get me started on the very, very small list of brands who, let alone pop culture figures who've included drag kings in the discussion around drag culture. So that's another I think good example of something that can that's highlighted. Graham, any thoughts from you on this?
I muted myself. My apologies. Hello. People who know me know that I am not. I am not immersed in drag culture to the point where it is probably embarrassing. However, I thought that one thing that was pretty interesting is like both of those examples that you mentioned are incredibly like, they're respectful. They seem to involve, the collaboration of the artists. One of the best things about drag queens is that, they are such creators and makers. So, to include them is very smart. It's the same as like marketers who are just generally like, wise about their influencer approach. The one thing I wanted to mention, because I just thought it was so interesting from our first one of these calls, is that someone, I believe it was Just Deutsch, mentioned when watching Drag Race, the people who are willing to do just the television advertising, right?
Mm-hmm.
That she noticed, products that she was like, oh, I'm not sure if these are necessarily like, intended for like the general market, so to speak, or they're like, queer products that are sort of like permeating the general market. But I think it's really interesting. We're seeing more scrutiny than ever on who chooses to just, place their messaging in broadcasts with programming that is queer or not queer or aligns with certain values. Decades have gone by of, well, we can't help it if it runs there. And then movements like Sleeping Giants and things that are going on with Facebook right now are very like, no, you have to be conscious of where your stuff runs. So though it's not as integrated and not as tailored, I think there's a lot to be said for the marketers who are still just like, yes, we are definitely throwing our money here because it does still mean something. And the people who don't do it first never mean quite as much, right? Like if when Dove says, hey, here's a crazy idea, all women's bodies are beautiful, and everyone's like, and it's like, that's groundbreaking. And then the next brand that does it is like, they're pandering. It's like, wait, what the hell? Like, this was bold one advertiser ago. And I think that, it's still like, there's certain controversy still and like back and forth in terms of like, whether or not, some of these brands are just jumping into the mainstream. But the fact is they're throwing millions of dollars into these programs and they have a choice to do that.
That's right. Any other thoughts on the drag culture piece?
So I have one
Please, yeah.
from a different perspective. This is your producer, Wes. So how do you find drag queens and the drag culture authentically away from RuPaul's Drag Race? What brands are doing that? I know you'd mentioned Bubbly, but how do they even go about finding the community and connect with it? What's ways that they can do that authentically?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's such an interesting time to be asking that question, right? Since, so much of drag culture is dependent on nightlife culture. And when that goes away in COVID times, how do you even discover new talent right now? There are some really great live streams that have become popular these last couple months in the LGBTQ community, most notably Club Quarantine and several others. So hopefully that is creating this virtual talent pool when the IRL one is on pause. But you're right. Yeah. How does one begin to become more inclusive of the non-drag race side of drag culture when the traditional discovery route is not available? Kate, I see your hand raised if you want to chime in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, I think you said something, I've never actually heard this term, and I think it's really interesting, the long tail, which probably means, I'm assuming, the delay of reappropriation of culture.
I use that to mean more it's the Chris Anderson theory, right? The long tail meaning the less well known, the 99%.
Okay.
Drag race is the 1%, right? Then what is the 99%?
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you for the clarification there. So then actually my question would be, looking at pop culture today and knowing that there is an incredible reappropriation of drag culture and specifically queer Black culture, seeing that come through, what do you think today's internal microcultures that are happening within the drag specific community in that vacuum, do you think those we are seeing now in pop culture, or do you think those are on a 3-year, 4-year delay because of Drag Race, and over time we will start to catch up?
Yes and yes. That actually tees up my next discussion point, but I do actually, Kate, want to get real quick to what Nic Allum has just brought up in the chat, that Real Leader, who I'm not familiar with, has been doing incredible things with her Quarantine Queen series. Nic, if you want to chime in and fill us in on that, I'd love to hear more.
Hi, yeah. Rhea Littré is her name, and she's kind of steadfastly avoided being on RuPaul's Drag Race because she's always said, I do drag because I love it, not because I want to get famous. And she's a West Hollywood icon, and she was the first really to start the digital drag performance series on IG Live. She does it on Mondays and Wednesdays. And made a point from the outset of including non-drag race talent to give them a spotlight. And, you know, that got picked up very quickly and almost, I have to say, almost co-opted by Todrick Hall, who then has put out a mini album, which is called Quarantine Queen. But yeah, I think as an activist in the drag movement and of the drag movement, she's a fantastic one to look at, and certainly for myself, it's been a fantastic introduction to a lot of local queens, interstate queens that I wouldn't have been aware of, and provided them a platform. And I'm following a bunch now, and what they've then gone on and done themselves from that Quarantine Queen platform is started their own little stage it groups, you know, and I know both drag race girls and non-drag race girls are using stage it a lot as little intimate performances where you pay $10 and then you're in a group of about 100 and you get this very intimate performance. And I think as far as the larger culture is concerned, you know, drag queens have really led the way because their income has, you know, disappeared overnight with the closing of bars and entertainment venues, were the first that I saw looking at culture who have turned what could be a catastrophe actually into an upside. And then if you add on top of that things like Cameo, where you pay for a one-on-one, like kind of meet and greet. Voss events I've seen have just started that as well with Drag Castle, where you can pay for a one-on-one meet and greet with some of the bigger queens like Raja and Alaska. But yeah, I think that kind of local activism, certainly from, you know, looking at Rhea Littré as an example, is tremendous, and things that brands are just not seeing. And I have this battle in my work when I'm advising brands and saying, you need to be looking at this because this is leading the way. And this is an opportunity to support this community. And also they're teaching you how to get things done in this incredibly fucking weird time. And you're not to co-opt it, and you're not to appropriate it, but you need to be paying attention because these people, these queer people, are leading the way in the new normal, the next normal of content and experience.
1000%. Yeah. And by the way, thank you, Nic, for turning me on to, so Rhea Littré is how you pronounce her name. Yeah, what you mentioned with digital drag is, yeah, that is one of the leading examples of, you know, certainly how to watch premium drag content in quarantine from a ticketed perspective. But again, to your point, like when it's so hard to ask people to, you know, pay to replicate the live concert experience, brands could and should be finding ways to be funding these performances through their budgets and through inclusive sponsorships that, you know, celebrate and not appropriate this culture. So Nic, thank you for sharing that context. All right, any other further thoughts on Drag Race or drag culture before we move on to the next topic? Okay, well, to echo what Kate was saying earlier, let's have an uncomfortable conversation about how drag culture plays into, and its history plays into the appropriation of historically LGBTQ vernacular in advertising. So, for example, popular expressions from "Yas Queen" to "extravaganza" to "oh krr," all have origins in gay, Black, and or trans culture, oftentimes all three at once. So could and should brands like a Pepsi with its "oh krr" Super Bowl campaign with Cardi B last year be co-opting this vernacular in their advertising, and why or why not? Who wants to take that one? I'll add something there. One of my favorite Twitter accounts that helps me keep tabs on mostly terrible ways that the brands are failing here is a Twitter account called Brand Saying Bae, B-A-E. Do yourself a favor and slap a follow on that if you haven't seen it. Nick, I see your hand raised again. Please chime in.
I think this is a really interesting one, and certainly I've been having these discussions recently. As much as the algorithms of social media don't pick up AAVE, they're also not picking up QVE, and you know, the listening through the filter of, oh, that's what the kids are saying. If young girls are saying, oh, then that's what we should be doing. I mean, I think it is so performative and disrespectful because it never has acknowledged where these terms came from, and what the language actually means. So I think it's you know, as much as brands need to be culturally relevant, you know, you've got to show that you've done the homework first. And that you do give props and respect to the origins of this language. And that's something I haven't seen happen at all in any circumstance. And that really needs to change.
Yeah. I mean, again, with the specifically, the origins of that get really wonky because some people like to give credit to that phrase to the actress Laura Bell Bundy, who's known for playing a very specific, like, pretty much blackface character named Show Cantel Brown. I literally checked her Twitter feed before this episode today to see if she's had her reckoning yet from this past month, and she has not. So get ready for that, you guys. But thank you, Nick, for sharing that perspective. Graham, you want to chime in here?
So it's sort of funny because there's a little bit of a weirdness with this probably on the brand side, which is that, and I've seen this specific to music stuff when I was close to an agency that was doing a lot of music deals. You know, folks like yourself make all the recommendations in the world. They do the research. They're like, this is what the kids are into. Trust me on this. I know that you might not be familiar with this artist. I know they might be kind of brave, but like you have to trust me on this. And then they're just like, well, I'm going to go with this artist because I know them. And how much do they cost? And it's just like, oh, wow. Like, you're really not understanding that this, you know, your campaign is not for you, right? Your campaign is for your consumer. But then you get to the opposite of that, where it's just like now, or it's the same dynamic, but like look at it in terms of what you're talking about with you know, with some of the linguistics of queer culture that came from Black queer people, that like, you know, the marketers probably put up a wall of like, hey, look, it's not on me. That's what the kids are saying. I don't need to know what it means. It's not for me. I'm not the target. Like, you know, so just sort of put it out there if that's the way they're talking and that's the way I reflect their culture. And you know, so it's very tricky because if it's like in the music example, if that's the case, like that you don't need to understand it. It doesn't need to be for you. Mm-hmm. But then like the slang thing, you know, it's like, okay, well, wait, but the slang is also not for them. But I would just sort of say that, like, look, in general, if you are a brand, if you are making decisions at a brand and you can't have that deniability. You can't put your hands up and just sort of go like, I don't know it. It's like, if you don't know it and you still decide to run with it and it's still not for you, you better have learned everything that you can about it so that you understand the full weight of what you're using. And also, I hope I didn't get into this too much like last week and then I'm not being redundant, or it might just be a drum that I beat forever because I'm obsessed with it lately, is just like, you know, brands who want to come to the party but don't want to help you when you're like in trouble are like the same as friends who are the same way. Like, we've all had party friends who just like show up for the party and then you're like, hey, I've got to move. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, I'm so busy. Like, it's the same thing where it's like, you know, I think it's very indicative of like brands who want to come to the party, but it's like, if you come to the party, you better help us when we move. Like, you know, finding out that a mass brand had used, I'm not even going to try to say occur properly. You and Nick have done amazing jobs on that. I was like, bravo. You know, to to be able to like come at a brand and say, you use that word, do you know the origins, do you do anything for our community? And then for that brand to be able to say, yes, we did the research, we know, we can prove right now that we are familiar with it, and also we gave $10 million to so and so. It's like, I don't think consumers are so averse to like, oh shit, they're there for us when we need help moving.
Right. To further that party analogy, which again is appropriate to now, it's the equivalent of showing up to the Halloween party in an authentic costume versus blackface. It's literally that.
It is, yeah, very much so.
So we have a question that's been sent in to us by one of our attendees, Jillian Pransky. So will brands find themselves in this reckoning that the media publishing are now experiencing with the Black Uprising, a public examination and audit of the corporate brand culture, and whether it wholeheartedly embraces LGBTQIA+, or as I finally call the queer community internally? And this is from Deanna Mikopoulos, whose pronouns are she, her, from the Lagniappe, Karnassi land we now call Brooklyn.
Thank you, Dina. Yeah, I mean, yes and yes. I mean, for the same reason that, everyone's leadership boards are rightfully so being called out for their lack of diversity from a racial perspective, we should absolutely be asking the same questions from an LGBTQ inclusive perspective. I mean, case in point, but also a shameless plug. I happen to be curating an event for one of my clients, Brand Innovators, on Monday, which is their first time hosting a summit that's all about marketing to the LGBTQ plus community. And the guideline that I set for them from the jump was to not invite brands who either don't have LGBTQ folks in their leadership, who are doing pride campaigns right now that I don't feel resonates, and so that if we are going to be having speakers from the brand community, make sure that they are representative of the community, and then for the brands who don't have any queer folks in their ranks, making sure that they are using their opportunity to share the stage with folks who are. So for example, Bubbly, who I mentioned, they're going to be having one of their partners from their charity organizations joining them. Fossil, who is doing a lot of really interesting work during Pride Month this month. Their charity organization is the Hetrick Martin Institute in New York. And so the founder of that will be joining the VP of Marketing from Fossil. So that's one way that we can all use our platforms as LGBTQ to make sure that we're only representing those voices as much as possible. But I'm curious if others have thoughts on that topic.
So actually, I'm going to take a little bit of advantage of being able to control the camera and audio. I have a question that kind of goes along with that. So we ask if there'll be a reckoning and reevaluation of staff members who are, and showing up for the LGBTQ plus community. How do we feel about ensuring that those that are creating media, whether it be photo, video, other content, should be of the community they're covering or talking about? So how important is it to have the representation behind the lens, let's say for covers of magazines like Time, National Geographic, other important ones where sometimes the photographer is not of the community they're photographing? How important do you feel that is to, flipping the question back on you?
All very important. Yeah, I mean, well, it's twofold. I mean, on the one hand, it's very powerful when, a notable member of the straight cis community shines a spotlight on us, but it's equally powerful when queer creatives are given that spotlight and given that opportunity. So I think it goes both ways. It's funny, like we're finally at a time only in the last couple of years where queer magazines have stopped using gay bait straight actors on their covers, right? Where, like you would put a gay actor a straight actor who played gay in a movie on your cover just to sell magazines. But thankfully we're at a moment where there's enough out and proud members of the community that they should be the ones featured and have, but we can all do better in those moments as well. Same with members of the lesbian and bi community, making sure that we're featuring the actual folks who identify as that versus straight actresses who are getting those opportunities. Any other thoughts on the representation aspect of media, as we are all still very much in the weeds of the media reckoning right now? Nic, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, keep cropping up, but have a lot to say. I think the representation, as you say, it is essential that there is representation in front of and behind the camera. But more than that, I think it's essential that queer representation is also coming into brand work from a advisory perspective in the strategy phase. I'm privileged at the moment to be working with Bobby Burke and Target. And one of the key initiatives beyond the pride work he's doing at the moment is really getting him into position where when different categories in the business are talking about their marketing strategies, is having him in the room, the virtual room, to provide that POV of what this means from an LGBTQ perspective, and really having him positioned as a strategic advisor. And something that we've been working on for a while, and Target is a big target right now. So it's something that I think moving forward, aside from representation in C-suite and management perspectives, is really looking to queer talent, either celebrity in the case of Bobby Burke, or influencers and creators, and embracing them as part of the planning process. And it doesn't matter whether they're strategists or not, they have a voice and it needs to be heard at the table. So working on that more micro level, and there are a lot of community groups out there, and Slack groups and all the rest of it, where I think people who are in that position of being able to connect queer voices with brand voices can raise this as something that should be part of the operational process of marketing moving forward as a long-term thing. And I'm constantly banging on to Target about queer representation and queer voices isn't just for the month of June. This is an evergreen approach that you need to be adopting now. So yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Target, because they're an example of a brand too that has come out the other side of the cancel culture of LGBT inclusion. It was only 9 years ago that Lady Gaga famously pulled a whole mini store of merch that she had planned with them for her Born This Way album, because Target had made a corporate donation to a Minnesota politician who advocated for anti-gay rights. So we're only 9 years out of that, and we're at a point where now not only are they working with LGBT talent like Bobby Burke, as you say, but they're giving him a voice. So I think it's important that we give brands like that a second chance, as long as they put in those years of work to reverse those decisions that previous leaders and others have made. I mean, that's certainly part of how we all vote with our dollars now, right? But to Nic's point, giving LGBT creatives a voice in the earliest phases as possible is so important, because clearly Target could have avoided a much bigger PR snafu than the one they resulted in 9 years ago if someone had taken the opportunity to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be donating to these causes if they don't align with our consumers and our artist partners' values. Any other thoughts on the representation aspect before we move on? Graham, please.
I just wanted to note, it's really interesting. I have differing sort of opposing viewpoints on cancel culture within my own head. I see some power to it sometimes. I see some absolute dismissal that's a little bit over the line sometimes. It all depends. There's a lot of nuance to it. But one of the interesting things is, there's hope to see uncancel culture at one point.
Yeah.
Because one of the interesting things is that, they were like, everyone's canceled, right? Until they redeem themselves. And you know, I think it's important for brands, just, you know, the people behind them as people to sort of go, okay, wow, we've been canceled in the minds of some people because of something that we really have to make up for. We're not at the point in the life cycle of all this where enough brands will have like really stepped up to sort of like reverse some of the things they did. It takes a long time. If they're doing it the right way, it actually does take a while because they're soul searching. Like, if every company right now for Black Lives Matters, you know, that says we're reviewing our processes and we're talking to our people and they're really doing it, it's going to take a little while, right? We want to see immediate change, but also, like, you know, soul searching takes time, especially for companies who don't know how to do it. So, you know, I think that, you know, representation can just be a huge opportunity for those who are, you know, looking for their redemption story. And look, people love a redemption story. So, you know, that for brands to understand that, for them to accept, you know, for them not to deny the fact they've been canceled, for them to embrace it and sort of say, okay, now how do we become better instead of forgetting it? Like, that could make a big difference in terms of how they connect to our community.
That's right. I mean, case in point, I thought one of my favorite aspects of yesterday's Hey Fam episode, for those of you who didn't get to join, we had two fantastic speakers, Nina Kosoff and Chris Bergeron, who were talking about another brand that had a rebound from its own cancel culture moment, L'Oreal, because 2 years ago, they parted ways with a trans brand ambassador. Now I'm forgetting her name.
Monroe.
Yeah, Monroe Bergdorf. Thank you. So Monroe Bergdorf, part of the reason they parted ways with her because she was outspoken for the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically the NAACP, and she called them out when they put out their Blackout Tuesday statement, and through a series of mostly public negotiations, and not the least of which of the fact that L'Oreal has since hired an out lesbian CMO, they were able to mend fences with Monroe, and now she is back on their payroll as a brand ambassador. And, you know, to hear Nina and Chris, who are two of the very few non-binary and trans creatives in our world, say that, you know, for them, the powerful moment of that was the PR story, the fact that L'Oreal did, you know, make a concerted effort to right their own wrongs and give trans creatives a platform again. I think that's part of the healing that comes with uncancel culture, to Graham's point. So even though the work itself has yet to, I believe, roll out, you know, those PR moments can be a big part of the healing process along the way, and certainly making the trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming parts of our community feel especially heard in these times. Okay, any other thoughts on representation before we move on to the next topic? We've got about 20 minutes, so this might even be our last suggested topic before I open up the floor.
I have one quick question.
Go for it.
Are there any organizations that you recommend that, as an agency looking for talent behind the lens or maybe even in front of it, they should look to, that anyone can think of? I think that's a big question I'm always thinking of when who to work with, how to find that talent, go beyond my own network. Do you have any suggestions for places to check out, whether it's you, Andrew, or anyone else?
I'll let Graham take this one because I know that he's really done a deep dive into others that share our values of inclusivity and being a specific resource. Graham, any thoughts there?
I didn't know this was going to get bounced back to me. Sorry, if you want to quickly rephrase the question. I was, sorry. Yeah.
So I was curious, do you have any resources, groups that we should all reach out to if we're looking for, you know, queer, femme identifying, just outside of our normal networks, to make sure that whoever we're using to create media for work, you know, adds to this goal that we all have?
Got it. Thank you very much for rephrasing. And I'm sorry I got caught up with I was flossing. Here is the thing about jumping into this space. And it's really funny because I saw an Instagram story from someone who's starting a group for his company in the UK, and was very just like, I have no idea where to start, right? It's In one respect, it's sort of funny because we don't have as much visibility as we need. And another, it's like an embarrassment of riches in terms of the groups that you turn to, and you know, and how to reach out to them and how to plug into them is a very like tricky thing. So like there are so many like established parties in terms of like the advertising industry already. Do the Work is not the first. We hope to be the premier, and we are differentiated in terms of the way that we are looking at the entire span of everything from like, you know, agency culture to, you know, to the work that's on the back end. And in the process of that, like, it's just a matter of like reaching out to like doing a lot of Google searching, reaching out to a lot of organizations, starting blank with the mailing list and just sort of saying like, hey, I want to say hi. I want to figure out how to do this. People who are reaching out to do the work are also just sort of like sending, you know, emails to the inbox where they're just like, you know, I want to do more. How do I do more? So it's like, it's not to deflect from the question per se. It's to say that like, you know, in terms of connecting with more diverse organizations, it's just a matter of like, you know, applying what you know about networking and focusing it in a very specific direction, right? So if you want to reach out to, you know, the Black queer community, there are organizations, you find them, you hit the mailing list, you search your LinkedIn to see if you have a contact there, you know, and just to sort of proceed that way. There's so many like niche organizations with so many different missions, and some of them have overlap and some of them are so distinct and specific that it's just a matter of what you're looking for, and then your willingness to like, you know, just put yourself out there to sort of say like, look, I'm not in the day-to-day of your thing, but like would love to talk about your thing.
Yeah.
Thanks. As the not agency interloper helping out here, good to get those perspectives, so thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, I was flossing. It's important to floss.
All right. Well, one more topic for discussion before we open up to Q&A. So as Pride Month comes to a close this week, I'm sure we're all, even though we're not going to stores as much as we would have otherwise, I'm curious if we're all still seeing the rainbow washing that especially apparel brands are doing. Here's one of my favorite terrible examples that's playing out right now. Kate Spade has a collection that starts at $58 for t-shirts. Because as Vox.com put it, nothing says LGBTQ civil rights quite like a $78 t-shirt that has Kate Spade New York in giant letters and rainbow colors, right? What makes that especially problematic is that the Kate Spade collection is only donating $25,000 to the Trevor Project, when many other brands are starting the threshold of at least $100,000, if not much more. That's obviously a small price to pay when you're paying $76 for a t-shirt, $300 for rainbow handbags that have no meaningful nuance mesh into the community other than the overall colors of the Pride rainbow. So yeah, what can we do about the rainbow washing that is still happening in 2020 from many other brands like Listerine, which we talked about in previous episodes, and many others that are just slapping a rainbow on things, taking it off shelves in June, and not doing the work year round? Anyone want to take that? Matt, hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good.
I have a lot of feelings about this. I think what's interesting is that I think some brands at least are starting to be smarter about it, or at least are having the right people in the room to help guide them in that way. I mean, before it was just like literally the rainbow for the month of June. I mean, I actually, when you asked this question, I just went back to my inbox trash and pulled up my Chipotle join us for a celebration of Pride email that I just received today, which I am like died laughing at and then just deleted. But then I went back to look at it just now and scrolled down, and it's because they're having a TikTok live lunch and listen with Karamo from Queer Eye. And then, of course, something for a number of every viewers, up to $50,000 donation to Center for Black Equity. So again, I mean, I think there is something to brands that will walk in that direction, which is heartening in a lot of regards. but again, that says nothing about like, here's what our corporate commitments are to people who are LGBTQ. Here's how we're trying to like find those people and elevate them inside of our organization. Because of course, the weird thing about what we do for a living is that does that become the providence of people who are just more active in caring about rights, who are more willing to be doing that kind of work, to be seeking out, I mean, about, especially if you're going to, as you said earlier, about voting with your dollar, to understand the places that you spend money, the brands that you care about, even if you don't like necessarily conscientiously care about them, to make sure that they're doing that work in that regard. So if anything, I don't know if you can 100% cancel culture attack brands who are at least trying, as long as they're trying with actions that back it up.
Right.
It will never be perfect, because again, you can't, I don't know if you can hold a corporation to a perfect standard. Yeah, I don't know. I want to sort of put that out, like less of an answer and more of a, I don't know what the right answer is. I'm glad to see people companies trying to be better, or at least not just recoloring their logo.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'm audible. Am I audible?
You are.
Okay. First off, Matt, know that Chipotle is the center of my gay cultural experience, and I won't hear otherwise.
I mean, Graham used to live like 200 feet from one, so I know.
Right. So it's just like, that's where I lived most of my gay life in New York, is at a Chipotle. I will stand by them till the end. It's sort of funny. I sort of have like, what you're talking about brings to mind almost sort of a tactical solution. The fact that when you have when you put out these emails, you know, what you're sort of mentioning is, I wish I knew this about them. I wish I knew what their practice is. I wish I knew what this is. And it's like, but there's no room for all of that in the email. There's never room for all of that in the commercial. But then I just sort of go, oh, well, wait, it's sort of funny because like with pharmaceutical advertising, they have so much information that they have to put in by law, and they have easy reference for that, right? Where it's just like, you know, you can see our symptom, you know, our side effects here, you could see this here. Like, it would be a really simple matter, I think, for a lot of companies to put up their, you know, have the page of their website that says, this is everything we do. And I don't think that's like common practice. I think you have to dig for that stuff. And it's sort of funny because we've talked a little bit before about how in the future it's going to be very on display. You know, there's going to be some reliable mechanism in the future for like looking up a specific brand and then just seeing the range of their political activities and what their actions are. But, you know, a very proactive thing I think a lot of brands can do that might seem kind of boring though, is just like when you have that Chipotle email at the bottom, it's like, and here's our Pride page. It's available 12 months a year. It says everything that we do for our employees and everything that we do for the public. Ta-da! Like, that could be something that's really simple.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I just went back to the email a third time and scrolled down further, and they start to describe some of the things they tried to do.
Okay, all right.
So again, and then I also just had the flash of memory that at the very first Pride Parade I ever went to in Chicago, they had a float. Like, they've been doing this for a while, at least showing up in the community in a way that says, hi, like we know you love salads. But again, it's so funny that just even because I'm in advertising, I see anything with a rainbow and my eyes roll back into my head before I even like look to read what the email's about. So I also wonder if this is a challenge for brands to figure out, like, does every brand need to be heard of in this way, or do we just need to know that this is happening because it's become something that makes business sense, and they don't want to be the person who's the odd man out when they actually try and show up for June and we call them out?
One, I wish you had said that at the last Pride Parade you went to, you just remembered that Karamo handed you Chipotle. That would be like the icing on the cake. Two, I think that to the point that Nic prominently brought up, and that you know, that prominently comes up in a lot of these conversations, is if you weren't only hearing from them in June, you wouldn't eye roll so much and have a more steady like drumbeat of like, oh wait, in this email they mentioned this program and that they do this. Okay, got it. Like that, you know, as someone who's in PR, I know it's very hard to like, you know, you catch people with the headline and then they sort of like go away, and that's, you know, the behavior that you have in reading that email, and it's the most natural, tendency in the entire world. But also it's just like, the way that you sort of get those support points out there is through like repeated cadence, and a rainbow email in June ain't gonna cut it.
Nic, I see your hand is raised again if you want to chime in.
Yeah, and just to build on that, this idea of an evergreen strategy, what I think brands really struggle with is that they're so entrenched in terms of their retail calendar, their business priority calendar, their existing planning modes, that they are finding it difficult to get out of their own way. And what myself and a lot of colleagues are advocating for now is that in this time of unprecedented change, like, you have to throw out the fucking rule book, right? You have to take a new approach to how you look at the entire picture and look at it from a culture first perspective. Is, okay, we want to stand up for the LGBTQ community. So how do we do that on an evergreen basis? And as you say, simple things like having a LGBTQ page that's right up the top on your website or your Pinterest feed or whatever, that you're constantly bringing that message home within email communication, that there is a constant presence, particularly from a retail perspective, on the shelves, so that it's always there, rather than, this, because what it signals is, gay people are only gay people for 1 month of the year. It's just ridiculous. It's the same with Black Lives Matter and things like Juneteenth and Afropunk. It's like, oh, well, Afropunk is the moment where all the Black people get together in the festival. So we're going to just show up for that. And it's just so performative and it's so tokenistic. And I think, as marketing is getting called out left, right, and center for the way that the boards are structured and the management is structured, the whole system needs to be attacked in terms of, you've got to start with almost a blank sheet of paper and say, this is what we want to stand up for. This is how we want to show up throughout the year. And then, and only then, look at the business priorities. That's my approach at the moment, and something that I'm not banging my head against a brick wall about, but it's very difficult for marketers and decision makers in brands to unlearn, what's basically a system that's been in place since, the 1950s and Mad Men, is sell people shit so that their lives will be better. We just don't live in that world anymore. So, attacking that and going after the people who do make the big strategic decisions, whether that's a CMO, whether that's an SVP, whether it's a planning director within brands, and just being relentless in pushing that message home. I mean, that's certainly how I'm showing up for my community. And I think the more people that we've got, a community of activist marketers that are doing that, the quicker it's going to happen. And I think LinkedIn is a phenomenally powerful tool to use for that, where you can look up the CMO of a brand and you can just start hammering them with messages. I mean, that's, kind of digital activism.
I love what you said about brands needing to kind of set from day one what their core values are. I mean, I can think of one, maybe two brands that have made LGBTQ a year-round focus. The most important one being MAC Cosmetics and what they've done with Viva Glam to raise literally hundreds of millions of dollars for HIV/AIDS research through social enterprise donations from all their products. But yeah, the other brands who do that year-round are very few and far between. So I agree. Like, having that as a foundational role is much needed. We have 4 minutes left. So I think maybe we even use this, stay on this topic to wrap things up. Anjali just said something really interesting in the comments about this topic as well, about how social impact folks, especially within brands, have no shortage of causes to prioritize throughout the year. So Anjali, if you want to chime in, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I've been having this exact conversation with so many of my friends who work for brands and labels and the like, for-profit places. And when I ask them questions, particularly like as we've been moving through this month that is Pride Month and that is Black Music Month, and you know everything that we've been all coming to terms with about the way that our industries have been built in relation to, you know, the Black community, the gay community, people of color, and how we all, you know, it's just an uprising. And when I have conversations with my friends about this who work at the brands, they're just like, you guys don't understand how deeply all of these things matter to us and how much our brands do want to support all of these things. But the thing is that they can't figure out how to get off of that calendar of like, this is June, so this is this month. This is February, so this is this month. This month is the month that we all do our races for Komen. This is the month that we all do our AIDS walk. You know what I mean? So they're all like living on this calendar because it's just like a retail calendar. It's like, these are the months where certain collections come out. And that way it builds to them a robust calendar of all the different things that they stand for and they want to put their money towards, but they obviously can't put all of that money towards every single one of those causes every month. So they have a finite pot the same way any department has a budget, and they just have to decide when to support what. And because the calendar seems to be set with all of these built-in impact holidays and built-in impact months, they just follow that. And now that has become a habit. Right? And is it a habit that needs to be broken? For sure. But I definitely don't at the same time want to see a brand not support some things that are really important in favor of other things when they can support both. They just have to divide up their time because most of these departments are small. And yeah, granted, there are some things like Andrew, we just had the conversation a couple of days ago about the Skittles. Right? We were talking about Skittles, and well, they're, you know, doing a $25,000 give or whatever the give is, and they're clearly going to make a lot more off of that product. However, this is something they do every single year. This isn't something that they're showing up and doing right now. This is something this is a day or a week that's ingrained into their calendar every year. So is that bad? I mean, there's so many ways that, like, would it be better if in the month of, like, you know, November, everybody supported, like a brand chose to support something off the calendar, or if they chose to support LGBTQIA organizations and causes in a month that was not June instead of June. You know, that's I'm curious to hear from marketers what you guys think the solution to that is. And FYI, just Andrew knows this, but you guys don't. I'm the one who gets the money. I'm not the one who gives the money. I work for organizations mostly. So I'm curious, you know?
Yeah, so many directions we can go, which hopefully if you guys join us for next week's office hours, we can continue a lot of this discussion. Actually, I think in 2 weeks, right, Graham, we're taking off next week for the holiday. But when we return on July 9th, we look forward to hosting so much more of this dialogue with all of you. So that's a wrap for today's Office Hours episode of Do the Work. Thank you guys all so much for being here and sharing your perspectives with me and your questions and thoughts. Your voices are so important, and we aim to amplify them further through these episodes. To check out the next session, find the schedule at dothework.com. That's WERQ. And at our website, you can also sign up for email updates and community connection activities. Please also follow us at Do the Work on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, you can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn. On the site, you can also contact us to share future guest suggestions and conversation topics. Can't thank you all enough for joining us, for all your questions today. For now, bye and see you soon.